6 Latin American dictatorships signed a secret pact to hunt human beings across international borders, and the CIA helped coordinate every phase. In November 1975, intelligence chiefs from Chile, Argentina, Bolivia, Paraguay, Uruguay, and Brazil gathered in Santiago to formalize what they called Operation Condor. The name evoked the Andean predator, a bird that circles patiently before descending on its prey. For the next decade, this network would track, kidnap, torture, and murder political opponents wherever they fled. Buenos Aires, Rome, Washington, D.C., no border offered safety, no embassy provided sanctuary. But the documents proving American involvement would remain locked in classified archives for decades. And when they finally emerged, they would implicate the highest levels of the United States government. General Augusto Pinochet of Chile became the operational center of Condor. 2 years earlier, on September 11, 1973, he had overthrown the democratically elected president, Salvador Allende, in a military coup. The CIA had spent years destabilizing Allende's government, and when tanks surrounded the presidential palace, American officials watched with satisfaction. Within hours, Allende was dead. Within weeks, thousands of Chileans were rounded up and detained in the National Stadium, where soldiers conducted mass executions. Pinochet's secret police, known as DINA, became the coordinating hub for Condor operations. Under the command of Colonel Manuel Contreras, who was on the CIA payroll, DINA maintained files on suspected leftists across the continent. Argentina's military junta, which seized power in 1976, brought its own expertise in state terror. General Jorge Rafael Videla oversaw what the regime openly called the Dirty War, a campaign to eliminate anyone deemed subversive. Paraguay's Alfredo Stroessner, who had ruled since 1954, contributed his extensive network of informants. Brazil, Uruguay, and Bolivia completed the alliance. What made Condor different from ordinary repression was its international reach. These regimes agreed to share intelligence, track refugees who crossed borders, and conduct joint operations on foreign soil. They called the victims los desaparecidos, the disappeared. The term captured something essential about this particular form of state violence. These were not public executions meant to intimidate. The bodies were meant to vanish. The killings were meant to be deniable. In Argentina alone, military forces abducted an estimated 30,000 people between 1976 and 1983. The pattern was consistent. Armed men in unmarked Ford Falcons would arrive at homes or workplaces, usually at night. Witnesses would see nothing. Neighbors would hear nothing. The victims simply ceased to exist. Families who inquired at police stations were told their loved ones had never been arrested. Habeas corpus petitions went unanswered. The Catholic Church hierarchy, with few exceptions, remained silent. The detention centers operated in plain sight. In Buenos Aires, the Navy Mechanics School, known as ESMA, processed an estimated 5,000 prisoners. Detainees were held in cramped cells, subjected to electric shock torture, and interrogated for information about their political associations. Most never left alive. Their bodies were drugged, loaded onto military aircraft, and thrown into the Atlantic Ocean during what guards called death flights. What happened to the pregnant women among the disappeared would prove to be one of Condor's most haunting crimes. But that revelation would not surface until the grandmothers started asking questions. Military officers had a specific protocol for pregnant prisoners. Women in detention centers were kept alive until they gave birth. Then they were killed. Their newborn children were given to military families or regime supporters, their identities erased, their origins falsified on new birth certificates. An estimated 500 babies were stolen this way in Argentina alone. The grandmothers of the Plaza de Mayo began their search in 1977. Every Thursday afternoon, these women marched in front of the presidential palace in Buenos Aires wearing white headscarves, carrying photographs of their missing children and grandchildren. The regime dismissed them as las locas, the madwomen, but they kept meticulous records. They collected testimony. They preserved biological samples that would later enable DNA identification. Decades after Condor ended, the grandmothers continued finding stolen children, now adults who had lived their entire lives not knowing their true parents had been murdered by the state that raised them. As of 2024, they had identified 133 of the missing grandchildren. The search continues. On September 21, 1976, a car bomb exploded on Embassy Row in Washington, D.C., killing former Chilean ambassador Orlando Letelier and his American colleague Ronnie Moffett. It was the most brazen act of state-sponsored terrorism ever conducted in the American capital. Letelier had served under Allende and had become an outspoken critic of the Pinochet regime from exile. DINA agents, working with Cuban exiles and an American mercenary named Michael Townley, planted the bomb under his car. The operation demonstrated that Condor could strike even in the heart of the United States. The FBI investigation eventually traced the assassination directly to DINA and to Manuel Contreras personally. But the full extent of American complicity in Condor remained hidden. State Department cables showed that Secretary of State Henry Kissinger had been briefed on Condor operations months before the Letelier assassination. A warning about planned Condor killings in Europe and the Americas was drafted but never sent. The cable was canceled on Kissinger's authority. The United States did not simply tolerate Operation Condor. It helped build the infrastructure that made Condor possible. Since 1946, the U.S. Army School of the Americas at Fort Benning, Georgia, had trained Latin American military officers in counterinsurgency techniques. The curriculum included interrogation methods, psychological operations, and what internal documents called neutralization of enemies. Graduates of the school went on to command death squads throughout the continent. Among them, Argentine dictator Leopoldo Galtieri, Panamanian dictator Manuel Noriega, and dozens of officers later convicted of human rights atrocities. The CIA provided intelligence sharing, communications equipment, and financial support to Condor members. A sophisticated computer network called Condortel allowed the 6 countries to coordinate their hunt for refugees in real time. American officials received regular briefings on Condor activities. They knew about the kidnappings, they knew about the torture, they knew about the death flights. In 1976, Assistant Secretary of State for Inter-American Affairs Harry Schliedemann wrote an internal memo describing Condor as a cooperative effort that had already resulted in the deaths of hundreds of people. The memo was classified. American support continued. In December 1992, a Paraguayan judge named José Agustín Fernández discovered what became known as the Archives of Terror, several tons of documents hidden in a police station outside Asunción. The files contained detailed records of Condor operations, arrest warrants, interrogation transcripts, surveillance reports, and death lists. Photographs showed prisoners before and after torture. Cables documented the real-time coordination between the 6 dictatorships. The archives confirmed what survivors had been saying for years. They proved the systematic nature of the killing. They demonstrated that Condor was not a series of isolated incidents, but a coordinated international conspiracy to murder political opponents. In 1999, under pressure from human rights organizations, the Clinton administration declassified thousands of documents related to U.S. involvement in Chile and Argentina. The files showed that American officials had detailed knowledge of atrocities and had continued supporting the perpetrators anyway. One State Department cable from 1978 estimated that the Argentine military had killed or disappeared between 15 and 20,000 people. The United States maintained close relations with the junta throughout. Henry Kissinger served as Secretary of State and National Security Advisor during the peak years of Condor. He met personally with Pinochet. He told Argentine Foreign Minister César Guzzetti that the United States would not criticize the junta's methods. "We would like you to succeed," Kissinger said in a 1976 meeting. "The quicker you succeed, the better." After leaving government, Kissinger became a celebrated elder statesman, received the Nobel Peace Prize, and advised presidents from both parties. In 2001, a French judge requested his testimony regarding the disappearance of French citizens in Chile. Kissinger refused to appear. Spanish and Argentine judges issued similar requests. He ignored them all. He died in November 2023 at the age of 100, having never faced legal accountability for his role in Condor. Some perpetrators were eventually tried. Pinochet was placed under house arrest in London in 1998, but returned to Chile and died before his trial concluded. Argentina's Jorge Videla was convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment in 2010. Manuel Contreras died in a Chilean prison in 2015, but the architects of American policy remained untouched. The death toll of Operation Condor remains disputed. Conservative estimates place the number of dead at 60,000 across the 6 countries. 400,000 people were imprisoned. Countless others fled into exile and spent decades unable to return home. The grandmothers of the Plaza de Mayo still march every Thursday, carrying photographs of children who never came back and grandchildren who may not know who they really are.